NFL Week 14 wrapped up on Monday. Let's take a look at all the playoff controversial moments that will affect the playoff picture. The Cowboys, they win 21-13 over the Giants in a tighter game than what they would have liked in a frigid New York setting. Prescott just 14 incompletions. He threw for 3 touchdowns. Manning had the only turnover of the night with an interception in the fourth quarter. Overall, not much happening in this game, but the Cowboys go to 9-4 and can secure a playoff spot in the coming weeks. The Raiders come back and beat Denver. They win 17-13. The Broncos only scored a touchdown on their opening drive and were held to 2 field goals on the rest of them. Carr threw a pick early, but he was able to rebound and throw for a touchdown in the fourth quarter to take the lead. Simeon didn't do too bad until the second half, where things just came off the rails. As Denver is eliminated from playoff contention already, the Raiders have the final seat in the playoffs at the moment. Now, the winner of this game would lead the division, and the Falcons win 30-24 over the Saints, and they sweep New Orleans for the season. They beat them back in London about 2 months ago. No turnovers in the game. Both quarterbacks were good through the air, but Devontae Freeman left the third quarter with a foot injury and will be out for a week, so that will hurt the Falcons as they face the Eagles next week. Atlanta is currently the 4th seed. The Saints are currently outside the playoff picture, as crazy as that sounds. The Bengals hang on against the Bears and keep their playoff chances slimly alive. They have an 18% chance to make the playoffs, though. Mitchell Trubisky, his best day of his career is a loss, but how about White with 2 receiving touchdowns? Dalton had a turnover, but the defense was good enough to get the ball back, and they took the lead late in the game. The Bengals are 5-8 and are 3 games behind as we have 3 weeks left. They have to hope the Raiders lose a couple of games. The Eagles win 21-10, and the Chargers, who are trying to get back in the AFC picture, this loss will definitely hurt them. So they fall to 6-7 in a rainy day in Philadelphia for the second week in a row. That's why the passing yards are so low for both the quarterbacks. But Philly, if they win next week, then they are locked into the playoffs. They play Atlanta next week. The Chargers are going to have to win if they want their chances to stay alive. This was a big game. The Seahawks come back in the fourth to beat the Rams on a cloudy day in Seattle. But still, they're outside the playoffs in the 7th seed. The Rams still lead the division thanks to their win over San Francisco. Goff didn't throw for a passing touchdown for the first time all season long. And then Russell Wilson threw for 3 touchdowns, another game where Seattle doesn't have a rushing touchdown. Then the Ravens are now the 5th seed in the AFC playoffs as the Browns lose 27-7. They are 0-13, and obviously they cannot compete for a playoff position. As Kaiser turned over the ball twice, Flacco had a decent day. Didn't throw too much. They didn't really need to. Most of their rushers got over 55 rushing yards, but the Ravens go to 8-5 and have a decent chance at making the playoffs. The Cardinals, even though they won, are eliminated from playoff contention. They won 27-14, their second win in a row. San Francisco loses again, and there are questions if Jimmy Garoppolo will be the starter next week for the 49ers. But Palmer, best day of the year for him as Arizona goes to 5-8, and if they win, they can tie their record last year, which was 6-10. But Arizona promising next season around the corner for them. Jacksonville, all they have to do next week is win, and they have locked up the division. They win 26-17. The Texans cannot compete for a playoff spot as they fall to 4-9, but Deshaun Watson's the favorite to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. Blake Bortles didn't throw too much, and he wasn't accurate for the second week in a row. That Colts game was really rough for Blake Bortles and another tough game against an opponent. Then the Lions are now out of playoff contention, even though they beat Indianapolis 35-21. They will miss the playoffs for a second straight season. The Colts are 3-10. They cannot compete for a playoff spot. The Lions are 6-7. Stafford threw for 4 touchdowns, the most in a long time. Brissett still looking accurate and still not turning the football over. But the Colts are 3-10. They'll get a high draft pick in the draft for next year. As Carolina They lost to Washington 14-9 in a pouring down setting in Carolina. If the Panthers lose and Dallas or Minnesota wins next week, Carolina will be eliminated if they lose. So they have to win next week. And the Redskins are already eliminated from playoff contention. But they go to 4-9 and can bounce back to a better record than what they were a year ago, which was 5-10-1. The Steelers beat Tampa Bay 21-14 in a fourth quarter that it was raining so hard you could barely see the field. No scoring in the fourth quarter. An interception, though, by Fitzpatrick. The Steelers are 10-3, and a win next week will lock up the AFC North. They have already clinched a playoff spot thanks to the win. Mike Evans was the leading receiver for Tampa Bay. Juju, the leading receiver for the Steelers. The Bills are now one game behind the Raiders for the last playoff spot. They won 28-14 over the Dolphins in a crowded Orchard Park. Tyrod Taylor, his best game of the year, 2 passing touchdowns and a rushing touchdown. Jay Cutler still not looking so hot. There's questions if Moore will start for Miami, if Cutler does not start winning games, or if the Dolphins want to tank for an early draft pick. America's Game of the Week, and the Vikings beat the Packers at home. And if Green Bay loses next week and Minnesota wins, Minnesota would lead the division. But the Packers are 10-3 and still have not clinched a playoff spot. Minnesota 9-4. They're currently the 5th seat in the playoffs, and looks pretty promising for them as they won, I believe, 5 straight before they lost to the Jets last week. So this was a good bounce-back win for them. Tennessee on Sunday Night Football, they play the Chiefs, and they beat them 28-23 in a big upset, as this helps Tennessee get back in the playoff picture. I don't think they have a legitimate shot to win the division, but they have a good chance at making the playoffs thanks to the win over Kansas City. So the team is 6-7. They can rebound and finish 9-7, possibly get the final seat. The Chiefs, if they win next week, they have locked a playoff spot. The Patriots have now locked up the number 1 seat in the AFC. Thanks to the win over the Jets, they go to 13-1. The Jets fall to 4-9. They cannot compete for a playoff spot. The Patriots go to 12-1. My bad, not 13-1. But they have clinched a playoff spot. If they win next week, then they clinch the 1 seat, which is pretty strong because they play the Dolphins next week. These two meet Monday Night Football both times they played each other. In the AFC, you can see New England 12-1. They clinch the 1 seat with a win next week. Kansas City, Pittsburgh, and Jacksonville division leaders. Baltimore, the Raiders, and Buffalo, the Chargers, Titans, and Bengals are all still fighting to try and get back inside the playoffs. In the NFC, the Eagles are now the 1 seat with Green Bay, the Rams, and the Falcons, Minnesota, Dallas. The Seahawks, Saints, and Panthers are the only teams alive to make the playoffs. The Lions don't have a good in-division record to qualify for the playoffs. So this is American Sports Coverage, signing off.